I found out that I was neglecting my saws in a bad way. That might make the ultimate firewood saw. Just being good old reliable. You know what's cool about that saw? That building is really close to being done. Application is always going to determine the final result. Do you guys neglect your stuff ever? Because you can't just blow them out, everyone. Filters need to actually be properly washed. I'd say that almost cuts more difficult than oak, really. I'd say this oak cut about the same, if not just a little bit easier. There is a brand new shop building back there, and that has been consuming a ton of time for us. But that doesn't mean that I've completely neglected all of the firewood duties. We've been making firewood, we've been cutting, doing little bits here and there, but I want to get my 500i out because I'm going to be testing that MaxFlow Mini setup. Now, do I need a foam filter? I have a tendency to neglect my saw. Do you guys neglect your stuff ever? Maybe it's less of an issue of neglect, but more or less time passing and you just didn't realize what you were doing. I just threw this setup in the shop. Very, very simple. I have made a couple brief test cuts. Guys, that is like 3 cuts in 8-inch wood. Anyway, I also did decide to nip off those corners down there. I may end up taking those other ones off as well, because it does press into the filter. Once you do that, the stock air cleaner probably isn't going to go back on without a new cover, because those are required for downforce, I think. I had previously thought that I would never run a foam filter again, but after having a conversation with MaxFlow, I decided that I would change my mind. The reason why I changed my mind is all I had to do was listen to his resume. They did send this product out. I'm not receiving any pay or anything to review this, but the reason why I took it is because I found out that I was neglecting my saws in a bad way. You see, I learned a lot about air filtration. The gentleman that developed these has been using these for, not using, well, he has been using, but he made them years and years and years ago for the timber cutters and wildland firefighters out on the West Coast. They have a very demanding, well, let's just say work schedule compared to someone like me recreationally cutting some firewood on my property. We'll talk more about it in a little bit. I want to see how this looks after I do a little bit of cutting with it. So let's get started. I need to get into this oak pile right here, but that means I need to get these stumps out of the way. This wood is pretty dirty. I bucked those off of the root balls with my 590. This is why I bought this saw. The work isn't always clean work, and sometimes you just got to make your cuts. Perfect. And well, that's a brand new Duke's chain on that 500i, and I'm not going to stick that chain into those dirty root balls. I am also going to get into this pine stack here with the 500i. We'll stand up and buck, 28-inch bar with that new filter. I want to see if the saw feels any different. I'm not anticipating much other than the need to clean my filter less. And like I said, we'll talk about that later. The Amish up there are fascinated with the stuff that I do. They really like my saw shed. One of them actually cut timber up in Iowa. He used a 395. You're supposed to shut the saw off before you stick this on, by the way. It would work better if you went from this direction. You might be asking why I'm running this 590. It's because it's the saw that I don't care about. It's not that it's a bad saw, it's that it's lower value and I'm going to save it for cutting dirty wood. It's the perfect application. The slower this chain, the better in dirty wood. And if it's a little dull, I'll just push a little harder, which you should never do, but that's what I got it for. I like this so far. We've got great discount codes at sawsalvage.com. Use discount code OKI10. This was sent to me to test it out. I wasn't so sure that I would like it because I'm generally a wood handle fan. But really, when it comes down to reliability, you can't beat a synthetic. That's kind of hypocritical because this is certainly not wood, but this is what I had been using. But this is a little bit too much diameter for my hands. The aluminum transfers energy and vibration a little bit more, I think. I've got a couple of these and we've had them for years. This one's developed a slight bend in it as well. Smashed the end in. Served its purpose though. But you all know what more hand tools means. That means more people can possibly help at once with no excuse, right? I'm ready to run the 500i. There's a stark contrast between this and that. There ought to be. There's a $1,400 difference. Remember, the manufacturer recommends having the saw turned off when you apply that onto the bar. It then also states that you should start your saw on the ground with it on there, and the reason why you do that is so that way it doesn't jar it off. That is out of the box Dukes. I'm actually going to go ahead and set those rakers because they are way too high, even I think when I get into the hardwood. So I was about to just take the rakers down, but the chain had actually been hurt a little bit. So what I did is I threw another Dukes chain on, and this time I set it to a softwood setting on the Husqvarna gauge. Otherwise, this is a completely untouched, brand new Dukes chain. A lot of this wood was drug through the dirt. I'm probably gonna be having a lot of that, but for the sake of just kind of seeing the difference, I just threw a new one on. I'm gonna put the other one on my grinder later. I'm starting to build up quite a few chains up there, which I really hate doing. That's the one problem about not filing your chains as you go. You can kind of start stacking them up. Before I get into more pine, I'm actually gonna jump over to the hardwood. I've got a couple clean logs over there, and I just wanna see how it feels in this oak. Oh man, there's a lot of dirt on that. Gosh dang. I guess there's no way around it. Yikes. It is what it is. This may be kind of nitpicky, but what I might do is cut around the dirt like I can see it right here. And cuts for the 590 and buck the clean wood like the rest of it with the 500i. A little bit of dirt up there. I really need to roll that so the dirt is coming out the back of the chain rather than being drug all the way through the log. This saw can use a hungrier chain. go back to the pine and see how this thing's doing. I think it's going to be much more satisfying to cut with. If anyone's wondering, I love this 500i. I'm not sure this is really actually the same pine as I have around here. Maybe it is.
Or you gonna put where?
Yeah, this one's gonna swing into the wall here. Before I keep cutting, let's go check out how the Amish are doing on my garage. That building is really close to being done. And this one, this is day 1.5 essentially. Metal ought to be here Monday, it's Wednesday. Look at that. I love it, man. Oh, you guys are wrapping up? You guys are almost done?
One piece of sheeting up there. We're ready to go up the next shed, put the door in, and
beautiful.
And put the 2x8s in and some stuff like that. Yep.
Perfect, man. Well, it's looking beautiful. We should get back to cutting, but this is really exciting. Oh yeah. We're going from 16 by 16 to 24 by 30 and 64 by 40 up top.
11 days later.
11 days later, that's right. You guys are killing it, man. If you're new here and haven't seen any of our videos, if you're curious about these 60 by 40, this building and the garage and the concrete and all that, here you are. They're about to put a door in there, which is awesome. I decided to go with pre-finished doors, which I should have done on the house. So here we are. We've got that real thin insulation up top. House wrap over here. They ran out of house wrap. I ended up with a little bit of insulation along this wall here, basically from that door to here. If you're here just for the chainsaws, we'll get back to that. But this is a 12-foot lean-to. He's kind of finishing up some finishing touches in here. I'm going to be running electric, some water line. I'm not putting water into any of the buildings because they're not going to be conditioned. But we're getting it. This man is the craftsman right here. They're doing some corrections on a few things on the building. But overall, it looks absolutely beautiful. I'm really curious to see how this 500i rips into this pine now with the rakers lowered down just a bit. These last two logs came from the excavation company. The growth rings are enormous on it. It doesn't feel like the same sort of pine. I'm wondering if it's like a loblaw that someone planted. It looks like it's less than, I don't know, 25 years old. My trees would have been more like 50 years old. Now, of course, that changes based on what kind of light they had. It was also cutting pretty hard for pine, honestly. all pine is created equal. Like I said, that came off of another property. You can see there's a bunch of like woodpecker holes in this thing. The wood is solid. I don't think it's the same species. Look at that ingrain right there, and look at that. That's my stuff right here, shortleaf pine. The bark didn't quite look the same on it. The wood, now of course, you know, that's been cut a little while, but here you go. This is my wood right here. It's just got a different color to it. That's a little bit more yellow, and that is definitely a lighter color. It's cutting totally different. I could use probably the West Coast saws raker gauge on this and even take the rakers even lower. That 500i is begging for it. Now let's cut a piece off of my property. I just learned something. Not all pine is created equal. I would have thought this stuff would have been harder because of the tighter grain, the slower growth rate. That stuff must have a ton of pitch in between each of those growth rings, because that stuff is rock solid in comparison. I'd say that almost cuts more difficult than oak, really. Let's go put this in a tiny bit of oak and just kind of seek for comparison's sake. Red oak, black oak, whatever, and then some white oak right there. I'd say this oak cut about the same, if not just a little bit easier. This felt harder than this. The growth rings are insane on this. They are like less than a 16th each time. Wow. In a moment, we'll be checking on the air filter on this thing, seeing how much dust it's collected. We'll go ahead and get this little hickory stick now. works, but we'll grab this baby instead. I've learned something. I actually really like that AccuMark on a 20-inch bar. It's really good. It works good on the longer bar. You know, the whole idea for me was to be able to stand up and buck. But, you know, I already have this 590 sitting here for any of the more undesirable cuts or as a backup saw. You know, honestly, just to mark it out with that works perfectly. Also, if any of my logs have dirt on them, I can go ahead and hit it with that saw rather than on my 500i. Less sharpening, and I'll run this one a little duller than I would that one over there. This one's next. My 590 Timberwolf is a better starter than my 500i, though. I will say that. Oh. Now it's equal. let's talk about this air cleaner. We're going to talk about what foam air cleaners are for and what they are not, and this is in the context of a stock 500i, or really most of the stock Stihl chainsaws, because MaxFlow, that's what they've focused on historically. The owner of MaxFlow spent a lot of time with me on the phone. The website shows all of the information that he gave me verbally, and I just simply can't remember it all, but I'm going to give you the few bullet points that I do remember. A foam air cleaner is not for performance alone. That's not what it's about. It can help with performance, but not in the way that you're thinking. A stock air cleaner on like a 500i, there's CFM ratings that Stihl has built into that. There's overhead, right? Because they know that the filter is going to be getting clogged with usage. What that means is that the filter can flow more than the stock saw needs. So by putting another air cleaner on, you're not necessarily going to just get this big bump in performance. Now, if you are running chronically dirty filters, and from after talking with the owner of MaxFlow, I'm finding that I've basically been running chronically dirty filters, because you can't just blow them out, everyone. Filters need to actually be properly washed. The reason why these were developed is guys would go out to camp when they're logging, I believe that's the term, and they would be cutting, and they would have to carry multiple air cleaners with them because they would go and not come back for a solid week. The original MaxFlow that he developed for, I believe, the 660s, 460s, and 044s, what they were designed to do was to give the guys a full week of cutting on one air cleaner. What that means is that air cleaner can maintain the proper CFM for the saw longer than the factory one can. And that has everything to do with the thickness of the foam. Now, you can't just put foam on there and put oil in there and think everything's going to work. I experienced that myself in the past. I was given a foam air cleaner and it hurt the saw's performance with no oil in it. That came right back off, and I honestly thought that I would never run one again. And then after speaking with MaxFlow, I found out that, yeah, he had tested that filter and he knew exactly why. He could basically finish my sentence for me because he knew the CFMs the saw needed to pull and what the filter allowed. This guy has thousands and thousands of dollars in flow bench testing. The main thing about this filter, now this is the 500i MaxFlow Mini filter. In fact, let's go ahead and pull the cover off now. And keep in mind, Stihl chainsaws have historically ingested more dust and chips into the intake than other saw brands like Husqvarna in the past. So a filter that could last an entire week was super, super critical in those harsh conditions like the West Coast loggers are logging in. Remember, if you're hiking out or getting helicoptered into the woods or whatever way they do it, you don't have running water, you don't have a bunch of compressed air, you don't have a bunch of things, and you just need the saw to work. Now, I'm not out in the woods like that, but I am a lazy saw enthusiast and homeowner, or homesteader, I guess. Let's take a look. Now, we're going to see some chips on here. Remember, the chips are not the main problem. The fine dust is. Oh, well, that pulled off. I actually am going to go ahead and trim those top two nubs off as well. Dang it. Things don't always go like you expect on video. We have a clean surface on that bottom edge. That looks very clean. We have a clean outer ring all the way around the perimeter of this filter. The kit that I was sent did have two filters in it, so if they're sold with one, I would definitely make sure you get a secondary one. The reason why is once you get to that point, you got to clean these things out. So those little nubs that I was talking about, I trimmed them off the bottom because they do dig into here, so you got to do that. I just used a little Dremel. The top ones, they kind of got into this edge here, so those are going to go as well. I like what I'm seeing, and that's not just because this was sent to me to test. This filter is not designed for a full week of logging, according to MaxFlow. This is more like a 2.5 to 3 day, depending upon the conditions. If you're doing like wildland firefighting or something like that, it's going to be totally different. Application is always going to determine the final result. I think I kind of sound like Motor Oil Geek there. So what I have is an air cleaner that has stopped all the fine dust, and you have to use oil. You cannot use this without filter oil. In classic fashion, many people will actually disregard the instructions and just throw the filter on there. That does you no good. Now keep in mind, this is a proprietary filter medium. It's been in development for quite a long time. He has his manufacturer. It's not just something cheap coming from China. According to MaxFlow, you can't use just any foam. I'm not going to just sit here and advertise for this because this is not a long-term product, but there's a lot of people that have a lot of time on MaxFlow products with a lot of good things to say. I just haven't gotten one in the past, and so this is my first experience, and I'm really happy that it's going on my 500i, because this is essentially one of the most expensive saws I own. Well, it is the most expensive saw. Who am I kidding? And also keep in mind, any of the best modern chainsaws that you can buy, no matter the manufacturer, are available using my discount code OAKIE10 at sawsupplier.com. That is OAKIE 10. That supports the channel tremendously, guys. It enables me to do what I'm doing here. It allows me to make purchases so I can actually talk about these products. So many people tell me, hey, you should run this, you should run that. This is what allows me to do it. You guys consistently come in strong because, well, they're a great place to buy from with good prices, and they've got the best stuff. What else can I say? This saw isn't quite out of fuel yet, but it's close enough, and frankly, I'm out of fuel. I need to really sit down and get into some editing. You'll notice that if you're a normal viewer on this channel, the content's slowed down a little bit. We've had a lot going on, and I think you know why. We cut up quite a few logs of this pine, a good size oak round over there, a little bit of hickory. Used the 590 for just what it was intended on. Just being good old reliable. You know what's cool about that saw? The chain isn't really bruised. I think there's a relationship between how fast that chain spins and the dirty wood. So the faster the chain is spinning, I think, it seems like it would make sense that the chain would get duller quicker as it impacts all that grit in all those rocks. That saw spins significantly slower than this guy does right here. That chain, not nearly as hurt. It cut through dirtier wood. It was slower. It wasn't as fun, but that saw is cheap. And we sell quite a few of those, I'll tell you that right now. And the best part about it is I'm not gonna sharpen that. I'm gonna bring that out again next time. Now again, it's not completely blunted. It's not rolled over. I would sharpen it then, guys. But this saw, I can just go ahead and throw it in the shed, throw it on the tractor, and go use it again. I love that. That might make the ultimate firewood saw, but really a lot of people have said that the 500i is overkill for firewood. Nah, I like it. It's what I want to cut firewood with. If I'm going to come out here and sweat, I want to have fun, right? So saws like that, 572, 592, 562, 564, all of that, that's what it's about for me. I want to come out here and have fun. This is not just about producing firewood. I enjoy it. If you haven't yet hit that subscribe button, make sure you do so. Hit that thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and I'd love to see you on the next one. I wish these guys would have built my house, and I also wish I would have used this material when I built my house. I have talked about how good the lumber was on these buildings, but the doors, you got to see this, guys. I gave them a Wrangler Star education. I talked about fizz, and these doors give me the fizz. Made in Bloomfield, Iowa. These are the nicest doors I have ever come across. This is perfectly flush. The ones in my house, there's like an 1/8 of an inch difference between hinges, and the jambs are like all over the place. Those were made in Missouri, and just definitely to a lower quality. I mean, I'm telling you, oh my gosh. They're the type of door that if you have your studs plumb and your slab or your substrate level, you just get to set these down And there you are. This is what's going on the garage. And we needed to replace the doors in the house anyway because we're shuffling some things around. I'm going to get these doors for the house when we do the housework. Look at that. These guys right here. Door Tech. Quality entry systems. And right there, man. Absolutely gorgeous. I couldn't be more happy. The only thing that I do wish is that there was pre-drilled deadbolt holes, but we'll take care of that. On the house side, if that's an option, I'll definitely do that. I almost didn't go with the Amish, but I am so happy I did. Look at this beauty. They've got this thing wrapped up in terms of the framing. All the blocking's put in. Talk about stout. This will be a very nice garage door install. That's another Amish guy that's going to be doing that. You know, it's always scary when you put all that money out. You wonder where, you know, how it's going to go. I am at peace and at ease. So much wood in this structure. We scabbed on 4x4s for the soffits to kind of keep consistent with the home. I'm fine with that. It's really nice. I sort of wish I would have went with overhangs on the building up there. It would have been beautiful, but man, sometimes you just gotta say no. You know, it's okay that every structure isn't top notch on the property, right? Yeah, look at that. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. We're so thankful. So thankful.